So we got some good news. The House and the Senate just recently passed the PPP Flexibility Act, and I want to discuss what that could mean for freelancers, sole proprietors, and independent contractors. Let's jump into it. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Jonathan Moore. I'm a photographer, filmmaker, and a creative entrepreneur. And I like to make videos like these for other photographers, filmmakers, and creative entrepreneurs who are trying to build a life on their terms and get it how they live. So if that sounds like something that you're into, feel free to check out some of the other videos on my channel where I talk about photography, filmmaking, and what it's like to build a business on your terms. Okay, so we just got some good news that the Senate and the House just passed the PPP Flexibility Act. At the time of this recording, I'm not sure if it's really signed into law just yet, but everybody's expecting for the president to get on board and sign it into law because he has been pressing for this to happen. So if you guys have been following along, you know how the PPP works. If you apply for it, you know how it works. And if you haven't applied for it, consider applying for the PPP because there's still money out there. And with these new laws that are getting passed, that money might end up drying up pretty quick. Okay, so let's just jump into it. For the sole proprietors and the independent contractors, what does the PPP Flexibility Act do for us? What are some of our worries? What are some of our concerns? And from what I've been hearing, I feel like a lot of independent contractors or freelancers have been getting nervous because now they changed the ratios. So prior, when the bill first passed, it was 75-25, which was 75% on payroll and 25% on qualified expenses. Now with the Flexibility Act, they're going to be a little bit more generous because certain businesses have different types of overhead. So they're going to make it more of a 60-40 split where it's going to be 60% on payroll and 40% on qualified expenses. These aren't set in stone. It just gives you more flexibility if you had more overhead or you paid higher rent or something than you were paying for your actual employees. Another good part of this bill is that they have talked about expanding the 2-year time frame from where you had to pay back the unforgiven portion of your loan and making that now 5 years. So what we're hoping is that they keep it at the 1% interest rate, but instead of paying it back over 2 years or 18 months because you have 6 months deferred payments, we can now stretch that into 5 years. Another good piece of legislation that came out of this act was that when you submit your paperwork for forgiveness, the bank has, I believe it was like 6 months to go over your paperwork and determine your forgiveness and what your eligibility is going to be. Now, what became problematic with that is that if you have 6 months of deferred payments, you could potentially start making payments on the non-forgivable portion, which could be the whole loan, before they determined your forgiveness eligibility. Now with this new piece of legislation, they are saying that you're not going to be required to start paying your loan back until your forgiveness is determined. So that right there in itself is good news as well. Now there's a lot of good things that came out of this law, especially for those who have employees and who maybe been struggling to either hire employees back or open up because of safety regulations. But when it comes to the sole proprietor, where does this leave us? As of right now, there hasn't been a ton of changes in regards to the sole proprietor or the independent contractor. The loan forgiveness calculation is still the same, which is your line 31 divided by 52 times 8, which is essentially your automatic forgiveness. So that is still in play. Also, from what I'm hearing is that they extended it from 8 weeks to 24 weeks. We don't know if they'll give us that 24-week calculation or if they're just going to keep it at 8 weeks. But some people who have already gotten their PPP loans earlier, they're probably running up on the 8 weeks. So the good news is that you can still elect to have the 8-week period as your forgiveness portion. This is also good for people who are coming up on those 8 weeks because let's just say you got the money, you did your 8 weeks, and business hasn't picked back up and you're thinking about going back on to unemployment where you can get the extra $600 for the PUA, well, that will still be in play because now you don't have to have this 24-week period. Now, unfortunately, that's about where it ends for us sole proprietors, independent contractors, and us freelancers, all my gig economy people out there. But wait, there might be some good news, and we're going to keep our fingers crossed and hoping that this actually happens. Now, there was an organization, I forget the exact name, it's the CBO, like Collective Bank, or I don't know, but it's a bunch of bankers, okay? And they wrote into Congress, and they're urging them to create this blanket forgiveness, which would state that all loans under $150,000 would just be automatically forgiven. They'll just forgive the whole loan. They're saying to Congress that if they were to do this, they would save around about like 70 million hours of paperwork of people going through the loans, determine what's forgiven, looking at the numbers, making calculations, you know, all that jazz. And if that were to come through, it would be amazing, because this whole loan would now essentially turn into just one big grant. For the independent contractors, the freelancers, the sole proprietors, this would be great, because mainly, if not all of them, have loans that are going to be under 150K, especially if you're just a one-man show, one-woman show, not leaving anybody out. But if you just operate simply as a solopreneur, then you know that you weren't getting a loan for 150K, which would bring you into the automatic forgiveness portion if they decide to go with this law, if they follow what all these bankers are saying and make it, you know, just a blanket forgiveness. And when you think about it, it actually makes a lot of sense. I mean, imagine all of these little loans out there. Why not just give a blanket forgiveness and focus on the bigger loans where there's probably more fraud being committed anyway? But this would be great. So if you haven't applied for the PPP loan yet, you might want to consider doing it. Also, if you applied for the PPP loan already and you got a little bit nervous and you gave the money back, from what I'm hearing is that you can reapply. Now, for those who've already applied and already received funds, you know, you're not going to get more money. You can't reapply and get more money. It's a one-shot deal. But if you applied, maybe you got a little nervous about the terms and the stipulations. Maybe you didn't do things right, because we are, you know, supposed to self-certify. It's not up to the lender to make sure that you're requesting the right amount. It's up to us. Then you can reapply from what I'm hearing. So if you're still on the fence and you're still not sure, consider applying. Look to some of the smaller lenders. I went through a small community bank, but you have people like Kabbage, you have PayPal, these different type of fintech companies who have certain allotted funds that were provided to them, who can probably get your application in quicker and get you approved sooner. So that's it for me today, guys. Hopefully you found this video useful. If so, give me a like, consider subscribing to the channel, drop me a comment, let me know what's going on with you and your PPP journey right now. And if you're still on the fence and you're thinking about, you know, whether you should or you shouldn't apply, I would apply sooner than later, because now with the whole flexibility laws in place, some of these bigger companies are going to get in there, because now it's going to make more sense for them to take on that loan, especially if they have more time to spend it on payroll. They're not required to bring back as many full-time employees, and they're going to extend the repayment period from 2 years to 5 years. So for all my people out there who are trying to build a life on their terms and get it how they live, this is your man, Jonathan Moore, and I'm signing out. Peace.